We cannot talk of Western education in Africa without mentioning Christianity and Islam. Uh, the first schools were built by Christian missionaries to catch African children young. and in course of time, Islamic missionaries followed suit. And so from the beginning until now, Western education in most parts of Africa, if not in all parts of Africa, are, is entangled with Christianity and Islam. Up to today. Indeed, most, if not all of our teachers from primary to university levels are Christians or Muslims. Or, yes, Christians and Muslims. Uh, Christian and Muslim teachers teaching our children taught us, because I'm included, from primary to university levels. And so, we cannot rule out the influences of Christianity and Islam. We must say that we have Christianized and Islamized Western education, with most of the teachers being Christians and Muslims. And so our schools are run by Christians and Muslims, even public schools. Unfortunately, even some public university administrators Christianize and Islamize the university system, such as by including church and mosque worship in their programs, like matriculation and convocation programs. So deliberate Christianization and Islamization of public schools, not to talk of private schools. So what are the consequences of this Christianization and Islamization of Western education on Africa, Nigeria in particular? Let us look at it. I think the first negative consequence is the corruption of African brain. The corruption of African brain. Let us look at some highly placed personalities, professors. Let us start with the living before we go to the dead. Professor Wole Soyinka, a Nobel laureate, describing our divinities as deities. Will you say he doesn't know what a deity means? Or what deity means? Because I don't know of deities actually. And traditional Africans don't know of more than one deity. So you ask yourself, where did Professor Wole Soyinka get his deities? As a Yoruba, what Yoruba word will he use to translate deities? So corruption of African brain. Now let's go to Professor Wole. Since I say let us deal with the living before we go to the dead. Professor Wande Abimbola is still alive, thank God. But these are people in their 90s. Saying that there is no devil in Yoruba literature. That's what he said in a video, that there is no devil in Yoruba literature. Simply because is running away from, like some others, running away from saying devil is called Eshu. Hmm? The best you can say is that Eshu is synonymous, is ambiguous, is an ambiguous term for both the devil and the divinity called Eshu. Just like you say Ogun. Ogun is Yoruba word, is an ambiguous Yoruba word for mercy and magic. So, and Eshu is an ambiguous word for both the devil and the divinity. Ambiguity or ambiguous term is known all over the world, that this word means more than one thing. How will you not have the devil in Yoruba vocabulary or literature? What do you mean by that? Are the Yoruba people special people who don't have light and darkness, good and evil? So, good spirit, evil spirit. So that is the level of corruption of corruption of African brain from Christianity, Islam, and Western education, unfortunately. Now, let us visit some dead people. Professors. Two of them professors. We start with Professor, well, of course, Professor Wole Soyinka, Professor Wande Abimbola. Okay, I say they are living. Now the dead. Professor Emmanuel Bolaji Idowu, the author of Olodumare, God in Yoruba Belief, where he rightly describes Yoruba divinities as ministers of Olodumare, messengers of God, specially chosen ministers of God with portfolio, as he rightly stated in the book Olodumare, God in Yoruba Belief. But only for Professor Bolaji Idowu to turn around and say that African monotheism cannot be said to be strict monotheism because of the divinities. So just to promote Christianity and demonize African traditional religion, which means demonize the brain of our ancestors and ancestresses. So that African monotheism cannot be said to be strict monotheism but diffuse monotheism because of the divinities. But Christian monotheism is not diffuse monotheism despite the Trinitarian conception of God by Christians. Oh my God. But for traditional Africans, to tell Professor Wole Soyinka and Emmanuel Bolaji Idowu in his grave, traditional Africans don't know of more than one deity, the supreme being, the creator and director of all. In their language, in their proverbs, in their maxims, in their philosophy. So, at any rate, the other professor, now late, and these two people, Emmanuel Bolaji Idowu and this other one, Professor J. Omoshade Awolalu, both of them died as old men. So you can see that Christianity, Islam, and Western education have been dealing with Africa since a very long time. So Omoshade Awolalu, Professor J. Omoshade Awolalu, misinterpreted some Yoruba names to arrive at his conclusion that Yoruba people don't believe in permanent death, but that whenever a baby is born, it is one of the ancestors or ancestors that came back to life in a new baby, and that they will go and consult the oracle to know which ancestor came or ancestors came back to life. Far from it. When somebody dies, the Yoruba will say, ó di gbére, ó dàrìnàkò, ó dojú àlá, ó di bẹ́ni bá jọ ni, ó di béèyàn bá jọ̀yàn, ó dọpọ́n babaláwo. All of that means that when somebody dies in Yoruba land, the lamentation is that until eternity, unless you encounter him in your dream or in the tray of the diviner, till eternity, unless you encounter him or her in your dream or on the tray of a diviner. So, deliberate distortion of traditional African belief to promote Christianity as a corollary Islam. So, Western education, Christianity, Islam, corrupting African brain. Now, let us move to abuse of Western education to perpetrate haram, aptly described as Boko Haram by the Muslim community. The Boko Haram Muslim community. How do you explain a situation where Nigeria's rulers will go and borrow a concept and be using it to loot Nigeria's oil wealth, claiming to be subsidizing fuel in an oil exporting country? A concept that applies in countries where they have no oil, but other resources with which they subsidize fuel for their citizens. And now we have the worst of them, President Bola Ahmed Tinubu, claiming that fuel subsidy is gone altogether and other subsidies are gone. So rather than using Nigeria's oil wealth to develop Nigeria, Nigeria's rulers have been looting it and claiming to be subsidizing fuel, and so making fuel price not to be too high. But of course, they always raise fuel price beyond the reach of Nigerians. But the Nigerians have never seen a president who will get the microphone for the first time to address Nigerians as their president and say no more fuel subsidy altogether, and that no more subsidizing anything for Nigerians. So, Boko Haram, abuse of Western education to perpetrate haram, such as in borrowing a concept to loot Nigeria's oil wealth, for which reason Nigeria is grossly underdeveloped and with mass abject poverty in an oil exporting country. Or when you want to talk about Boko Haram, let us look at what the leaders of the Academic Staff Union of Nigerian universities are doing to their members. They amended the constitution in 2012 to be, and empowers themselves as leaders to be extorting 2% of each ASU members' monthly salary as membership due, monthly basis, and to increase or decrease the 2% as deemed fit by the leaders alone. And so in 2024, the 2% since 2012 was increased to 3%. The ASUU leaders deemed it fit in 2024 to increase the 2% to 3%. And that has been the order of the day since 2024. ASUU members losing 3% of their monthly salaries, each member, to ASUU leaders. Despite lamentation and agony over poor pay. And why? Because since 2013, ASUU leadership has been taking bribe from government and calling it the end academic allowance of the members, which is not. So, look at the level of impoverization visited on ASUU members by ASUU leadership, extorting a percentage of their salaries, charging membership fee by salary percentage rather than a fixed amount for all members, since membership is equal for all members. So, look at the situation of Nigeria in total mess now, with insecurities and worsening mass abject poverty. And look at the situation of ASUU members under the ASUU leadership, the apex academic workers union in Nigeria, Boko Haram. That is what we get from Christianity, Islam, and Western education. Only because ASUU leadership has the backing of both the university administrators and government, because they are all corrupt together. They are all perpetrating Boko Haram. So, Nigerians, what did you get from Christianity, Islam, and Western education? Boko Haram. Gross underdevelopment of Nigeria and worsening mass abject poverty. That is what Christianity, Islam, and Western education are giving Nigeria.